Hello. So we're just starting the business meeting now, but the first part of it is a tribute to Alan Jeffrey, who a lot of you will know. I'm not going to say very much, but Andy is going to give a proper tribute. But I didn't know Alan that well, but he did serve on the PC for me last year and did an excellent job. And he was the two of clubs. We had playing cards for everyone on the PC. And he's been involved in ICFP for years and years and years. Served as the industrial chair in 2018, most recently as well. But I'm not going to say any more. I'm going to just pass on to Andy.
Thank you, Sam. So I'm going to speak about Alan and then hand over to Robbie. And we also have a contribution from Lars Bergstrom, who was his manager when he was at Mozilla. So yeah, this is in remembrance of Alan, and I feel somehow his spirit is with us at this gathering of functional programmers. So Alan was born in January 1967, and he grew up in Glasgow. He attended Hindland Secondary School, leaving in 1983 for university in Edinburgh. And you know, he was only 16, but he was eager to get to Edinburgh so he could use a proper computer lab and to crack on with computer science. Alan and I met as students at Edinburgh University. That's Alan up there with a lot of hair that he actually kept to the end. Alan and I used to joke that when we collaborated together that Gordon and Jeffrey would never cut their hair, and unfortunately I did. But he kept it to the end. And his great friend Jeremy Gibbons is beside him there, in the third back row, and that's me in the front. Our very first lecture as undergraduates was given by Robin Milner. The sharp-sighted will see that gent is not, in fact, Robin Milner. But then again, this wasn't our first lecture at Edinburgh University. Robin was a hero to us and a huge influence on our careers. Robin supervised Alan's final year project on a calculus of communicating systems, CCS. And then Alan went to Oxford to work with Bill Roscoe on concurrency theory, and he graduated in 1992. Jeremy tells me they lived together in a hovel in St. Mary Road. It was him, it was Alan, it was Jeremy Gibbons, who's known really well to many of us, who's on the left there, and Simon Mercer, who's both of whom were lifelong friends of Alan. And yeah, and they're pictured here on the way to a ball, as you do in Oxford. As a student, Alan was a team member of the LaTeX document preparation system, and he was a great Metafont user, and he invented the Blackboard bold font, which is, as you know, is a standard LaTeX feature seen often in theory papers. And the week that he died in July, Lindsay Cooper posted this, saying that I think we're going to be seeing reminders of Alan everywhere we look for a long, long time. So after his PhD, he flourished in an academic career in Gothenburg, in Brighton, and then over to Chicago. And then he had a dozen-year stint as a member of technical staff at Bell Labs in Chicago. And he has two papers at ICFP. Back in 1996, on the left, when he was at Sussex, he was developing a theory of functional programming with concurrency. And in 2013 at Bell Labs, he was developing a type system for event-driven FRP programs to provide liveness guarantees. he very much found research success as a theoretician, and when I first working with him, he would like self-identify as the theoretician. And he has an impressive portfolio of 8 research papers at LICS, which is pretty cool. And the last one was with his great friend James Riley, based in Chicago, which is on thin air reads towards an event structures model of relaxed memory. And here's a nice pic of James with Alan at LICS in 2016. So my actual research collaboration with Alan started in 2000. Here's a picture I took of him. He was very hospitable to me, and when we were researching, I would go and stay like for a week with him in Chicago, which was fantastic. And we were working on a dependent type and effect system for the SPI calculus, which was a variant of the pi calculus that was for describing cryptographic protocols. And it's a system that can prove that one event happens before another, which is important in crypto protocols. And we had typing rules that could capture usages of fresh keys and nonces. And here's a screenshot from his website for his cryptographic protocol type checker. So the way we'd collaborated, it was a little complicated because I was at Microsoft and he was at a university, was that he did all the coding and we collaborated together on the theory. But he entirely implemented cryptic. And looking back at it, he did this in 2001, and I think that's one of the very first static checkers of cryptographic properties of implementation code. And it was a funny thing this year, after we knew Alan was very sick, that, oh, it's just terribly sad, that we together, it was a funny thing that we got this Test of Time award from CSF, that we published this paper in 2001, and we were super proud of it, and it was recognized by the CSF community. And happily, Alan heard about this, and I was able to travel to Chicago, which I would have done anyway when he was so sick, and I prepared a video of it, an acceptance speech, and he was, he approved it. And I had to do it remotely, but we were able to accept the award. Though very sadly, that was shortly after he had died. But he was aware that the community had recognized his work, which is a great thing. And Nick Swamy, who very familiar, inventor of F***, he said, "I've read and reread that paper many times. And indeed, a lot of what we do today in F* grew from this particular work you guys did. Alan's passing is such a loss to the community. It's some small consolation that he was around to see the far-reaching impact of this work acknowledged." So, back to his career, he had, after Bell Labs, he joined Mozilla Research. And these days, he identifies as a research engineer interested in the application of tools and techniques from CS research to practical problems. And he was at Mozilla from 2015 to 2020 as a staff research engineer on Servo, which you'll know was I think was the first major application of the hugely successful Rust programming language. And he worked on multi-core systems and constrained devices such as VR and AR headsets. And Servo was formative in Rust's success, and as Alan later remarked, Rust has turned out to be so much bigger than Mozilla. And here's a shot at a workshop during that time. He spoke about 2 favorite papers, very much revealing his sort of ICFP heritage. He called, I think this was a workshop, in which people spoke about their favorite bits of work that had influenced them, and that 2 that Alan described were Modji's computational lambda calculus and Phil Wadler's work on comprehending monads. And we have a video here from Lars Bergstrom, who was his manager at Mozilla.
Hi, so my name is Lars Bergstrom, and I had the great opportunity to manage Alan Jeffrey for 5 years at Mozilla Research. And one of the things that I was told when I was in graduate school is most people who leave the academic space have about a 2-year window where they can still stay involved, and then eventually it falls off. Now, this is held up through many, many hires and many employees, and unfortunately myself as well, but really not for Alan. Not only did he continue to be involved at ICFP as the industrial chair, but he also continued to participate in publishing on prior research. Even beyond that, when presented with interesting problems, he always took an academic approach to it, both from a solutions perspective as well as mentoring and education. So one of the problems that I gave him, of many throughout the years, was the opportunity to look at sort of how navigation works in the web browser. That is, you go back, you go forward, you click on some links. Turned out, like most things in the web platform, it was ill-specified and a bunch of bugs and not compatible between implementations. So rather than just sort of hammering out the bugs at the edges, not only did he build a full formal model of it, he also took the opportunity to take one of our interns, educate them on how to make a research paper, how to do formal modeling, and then how to go back and work upstream with all of the partners to fix the various web browsers and the specifications. And it was really his dedication to not only building great solutions, but to growing the people that he worked with and leaving the world a better place that I will really miss in all of our collaborations and all of the time that I spent with Alan.
So Alan's final role since December 2020 was as principal software engineer at Roblox. Alan brought a type system to the Lua programming language, which is for creating games on their popular platform. Let's see the start of Alan's cool presentation on his work at Roblox.
So, hello, I'm Alan Jeffrey, and I'm from Roblox. Today, I am going to be talking about the goals of the Lua type system, a position paper about the Lua programming language. And the Lua programming language is the language that's used inside Roblox experiences. So anybody who's using Roblox, this is like the system that they're inside of.
So Alan was incredibly smart and kind and humane. He had an intense forensic ability to find bugs. For instance, he found a type unsoundness bug in a released version of Java, and then he ended up having to join the committee to help fix it. And we examined a PhD together, and kind of shockingly, he found a subtle bug that unpicked the argument of half the dissertation. And as this pic of his bookshelf indicates, he was super into both PL theory, the bottom, and Doctor Who, the figures at the top. Alan was really into Doctor Who. I mean, I was into Doctor Who when I was younger, but Alan was really into Doctor Who. And this is him, really amazing shot of him with the TARDIS at a Chicago Doctor Who convention. And culturally, he had this phenomenal recall of music and TV and cinema. You know, he could just go on about the plots of so many things. It was really wild. He instilled in me an interest in comic books, one of his lifelong passions. And here are two of his Marvel comics, 40 years apart. Alan leaves behind two daughters, Janine and Laura, whom he loved very much and co-parented with Karen. So I say, farewell, Alan. We struggle to make sense of this, your early passing. You led an extraordinary adventure of a life across great cities of Europe and then to Chicago. You divided your career between academia, corporate research, and frankly, phenomenal startups. Knowing you was one of the great friendships of my life. Your humor, intelligence, hospitality, your humanity, your dear fathering, you always made me want to raise my game. So Alan, may your memory be a blessing.
Thanks, Andy. So I know that many in this room knew Alan better than I did, but I imagine that there's plenty here who know him maybe only by reputation. And maybe it's worth your time to learn a little bit about his personality, and so I'll point you to the documentation that he wrote for the Blackboard Bold LaTeX, where you can see his personality on very clear display. His extreme lack of self-promotion in his discussion about the curve of the lowercase r and the relative widths of the a and b is quite clear. His dry sense of humor is very evident in the legal rubbish section of that documentation as well. So I encourage you to check that out. I knew Alan as he was my kind of go-to Chicago PL buddy. So I would see him every year, every 2 years for several decades, whenever there was someone visiting Northwestern or when one of my students was defending. And it's very much like Lars was relating here, how Alan would show up with these defenses, and he would he was this incredibly smart, incredibly knowledgeable, engaged person in this defense of this student who just really wanted to talk to them about what was going on, and it really made a difference for them to see that there were people like that out there. So like I said, I saw him every year, every 2 years, basically for a long period of time in Chicago. And then, but over the last year, I spent a lot more time with him. And so I've sort of reflected on this last year of his life, and I wanted to share 3 things with you guys about that are things maybe that are ways we can be better. Okay. So there's kind of 3 things that stood out to me as I visited him. The first was he had a fierce pride in his daughters. So just the way that they grew up and what they had become, just off to college, that's the age that they were in. Whenever he spoke about them, it was this pride was very evident. And there's something kind of, so he had brain cancer, and the cancer was in the part of his brain that affects how well his speech works. And it had kind of a weird effect. And so there was sort of his speech, he was unable to speak, basically, where he got down to the point where he had 4 words. Okay. And, as we all know, the information density that you're able to achieve when you use binary is a significant improvement over unary encodings of things. So clearly 2 of these words were going to be yes and no. They're, of the 4 words. And so the other 2 words that he, I don't think consciously chose, but the other 2 words that he could form were Laura and Janine, the names of his daughters. So whenever you would ask him a question, if the answer was yes or no, you would get a yes or a no. This is like in January, okay, and his speech got better, but during this period when he only had 4 words. And if he wanted to say something more complex, Laura would come out, or Janine would come out. If there was some more interesting answer he wanted to offer to you or something he wanted to say, it would just... There's this complex thing that happens. The thoughts in his brain were very well formed. The process by which they get translated into all these tongue movements that I'm doing right now in my throat and the breathing and the coordination there was totally broken. But it was broken in a weird way, kind of at the beginning of the process. So somehow, Laura and Janine. So just to give you a sense of the importance of his daughters. Okay, so that's the first thing. His fierce pride. Okay. The second thing that really impressed me was his brother and his sister. They lived in the UK, And they completely put their lives on hold just to come and help Alan during this time. You know, to be with him, but there's a lot of things, you know, his body was broken, okay? And there's a lot of things you need help with in that situation, not just sort of at the end of life, beyond the sort of things that happen at the end of life, which are complicated, as maybe some of you will know, but also just to be there with him. They just completely put their lives on hold to do that, and it's really something. I mean, do you have someone in your life that you would do that for? Completely put your life on hold and just like go a third of the way around the world and spend 2 weeks at a time taking care of them and what they need? I don't know. All right, the third thing that stood out with me is maybe the most consequential for me personally, and also the hardest one to describe. I've thought a lot about how to say this, but it's hard for me to get the right words to convey. So I'm gonna make an attempt, okay? And let's see. You know, Alan knew that he might not last through any particular given week during this period. And, you know, like I said, his body was broken, his speech was completely messed up. Like half his body sort of didn't do what he asked it to do. The other half would, but one half wouldn't. And he was, you know, it's hard not to be aware of that. He's a very sharp guy. You know, you see what's happening to yourself. And I remember one time his speech was getting better and his physical therapy was getting better, and I said to him something like, you know, there were these two research projects that he really wanted to finish up. And I said to him, oh, look, maybe in a month or two, you're going to be able to make some contributions to these, and it will be great. And he looked at me and he said, I'm done. You know, it's like he knew, and in a very deep way. And okay, so if I were in his shoes, you know, denial would be, if it wasn't denial, it would be depression. I don't think I would be able to escape those two things. But this is the thing about Alan. I visited him every week during this period, almost every week. And I just wanted to keep coming back and to spend time with him because of the positive energy. These are not the right words, but just being around him was really fantastic, because even though he was in this terrible state, he just loved life. I mean, he had so much joy with the things that were around. Every time I showed up, he had another band that he wanted to show me that he just discovered, a new piece of music or a TV show or something like that, that he was amazed I hadn't seen. He happened to be watching it when I came in, and he was like, oh, this is amazing, you have to see this. So those are the three things that I wanted to share with you that really stood out. One, fierce pride in something. Do you have a fierce pride in something? You should get a fierce pride in something. It's amazing. Do you have someone in your life that you would just put your life on hold for if something were to happen for them and they would need that? And more to the point, do they know? Does that person, whoever that is, do they know about that, about you? Something to think about. And maybe can you live up to this attitude of life? There's this old prayer. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, the wisdom to know the different, the courage to change things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And so this word serene, you think of this word serene, you think of I don't know, some idyllic, you know, calming, there's a pond or something, or somebody who, you know, it's very smooth. Let's call that syntactic serenity, okay? Alan had semantic serenity. He had a deep sense of, I don't know, joy and acceptance of whatever it was that was there in front of him. So that's something to think about. Okay. All right, so maybe let's take a minute now and hold silence for Alan. All right, and whenever you see a LaTeX paper with Blackboard bold in it, remember Alan. Let's offer him a round of applause for a life well lived.